All right, hey everyone. Let's jump into something that could really shake things up globally, something you'll definitely want to know about, especially if you're prepping for those UPSC exams.
Oh, absolutely. Big implications here.
We're talking about a report that was in The Hindu, drawing on some insights from the New York Times, and it's about potential U.S. travel restrictions. The kind that could redraw the map, so to speak.
And what's fascinating is how the Trump administration is, well, maybe taking a page from its own playbook, but with a bit of a twist. Remember the Muslim ban, all the debate that sparked?
Oh, yeah.
This time it seems like the scope could be much, much wider.
Okay, so let's back up a sec for some context. What exactly is behind this whole new wave of restrictions?
Well, it all stems from President Trump's executive order, the one from January 20th. The goal, at least what's stated, is protecting American citizens from threats, perceived threats, that is.
Hmm.
And this kind of rhetoric really lines up with his past stance on immigration, but the way it's shaping up, the system they're proposing, is different this time around.
The Hindu article talked about a three-tier system, which honestly sounds pretty complex. Could you break that down for us a little?
Absolutely. Picture three lists: red, orange, and yellow. Each one's like a level of travel restriction. Red list, that's the toughest. Essentially a total travel ban. Countries like Afghanistan, Iran, and Syria, they're apparently being considered for this one.
Gotcha. So what about the other two? How do those differ? And are there any countries on those lists that, might ring a bell?
Sure, the orange list is kind of a middle ground, signifying restricted travel. We're seeing Pakistan and Russia on this one, both with obviously significant ties to India.
Oh, Pakistan being on that orange list has to raise some eyebrows in India, right? I mean, the implications for things like regional stability and India's own foreign policy could be huge.
Exactly. It's a total domino effect waiting to happen. Think about it. Diplomatic relations, trade, even the balance of power in South Asia, all could be affected.
This three-tier system, it almost feels like a more, elaborate, maybe even impactful version of that travel ban we saw earlier in Trump's presidency. What are the main differences, and could these new restrictions face those same legal challenges?
You're spot on there. While the earlier ban mostly targeted people from Muslim-majority countries, this new system seems to be casting a wider net. The criteria are broader, too. It's not just about where you're from, but things like how a country shares information, their passport security, even countries that, say, offer citizenship as a way to maybe get around these restrictions.
That selling citizenship point to circumvent the ban, that's really interesting. Can you expand on that a bit? How would that even work?
Okay, imagine someone from a country on that red list, the total ban list. Now, say they manage to get citizenship in another country, one with looser immigration rules, maybe by investing there or something. This could potentially let them into the U.S. even though their original country is banned.
So it's like a loophole they're trying to close, even if it means restricting travel from countries that might not directly pose a threat.
Exactly. It shows just how complex these global migration patterns are, the real challenges governments face when trying to control who comes in.
But wouldn't this raise some serious ethical questions? I mean, restricting travel based on a country's economic policies, that seems like, well, a slippery slope.
No doubt it raises important questions about fairness, the potential for unintended consequences. But it's important to remember that these lists, they're still being reviewed by different departments and agencies. It's a fluid situation, and chances are the final version will look quite different.
That makes sense. So it's a moving target, basically. Makes staying informed even more important. But for our listeners, especially those getting ready for the UPSC exams, what's the big takeaway here?
This whole situation is a prime example of how what happens domestically in the U.S. can have ripple effects around the world. Understanding those connections is crucial for anyone who wants to analyze global affairs, especially when you're thinking about India's role on the world stage.
Yeah, it's a textbook case for the UPSC, honestly. Touches on all those key areas.
Yeah.
International relations, global security, even the economic side of things.
Right, and it really drives home just how unpredictable things can be out there, you know? You think you've got a handle on the world, and then bam, a policy shift like this just throws a wrench into everything.
Oh, for sure. That ability to adapt, to analyze things as they're happening, it's essential, not just for, say, aspiring diplomats, but for anyone trying to navigate this crazy interconnected world we live in. So, okay, let's play this out for a minute. Say these restrictions actually do go into effect. What kind of real concrete impacts could we see, let's say, on India's economic ties with the U.S.?
Well, take that orange list, for example. If travel between India and the U.S. gets harder, even for business, it could really slow things down. Investment, collaboration, Even the flow of skilled professionals back and forth, all that could take a hit.
And what about the human element? I mean, we can't forget about the individuals, the families who might be directly affected by all this.
Absolutely, that's crucial. Think about Indian students who are hoping to study in the US or families that are, separated by these kinds of barriers. The impact on people's lives can be, well, profound. It just adds another whole layer of complexity to the issue.
It is a reminder, isn't it, that these policy decisions, they often have these consequences that reach far beyond what was intended, good or bad.
That's right. And that's why it's so important to look at these situations from, all angles. You've got to think about the economics, the geopolitics, and yeah, the human cost too.
The Hindu article touched on how this could impact regional stability. Could you unpack that a little more for us?
Sure. So Pakistan being on that orange list, it could really escalate tensions between India and Pakistan. It's already a tense relationship, right? And this could make it harder to even keep a dialogue going, which could in turn stall progress on, critical issues, things like terrorism, Kashmir.
It's like a house of cards, isn't it?
Yeah.
One wrong move and the whole thing could come crashing down.
Exactly. And it shows just how important it is to have, clear communication, some strategic diplomacy to navigate these really sensitive situations.
Now, you mentioned earlier how that previous travel ban faced legal challenges. Do you think these new restrictions could end up in court too?
It's definitely possible. I mean, remember, the Supreme Court did uphold a version of that travel ban, so there's a precedent there that could come into play. But this time, the scope is broader, the criteria are different, so that might open the door to some new legal challenges.
It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, but I think for our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC, the big takeaway here is, well, stay informed and think critically about what you're seeing.
Absolutely. The world is constantly changing, and being able to analyze current events, connect the dots, even anticipate what might happen next, that's invaluable. And not just for exams, but for, life in general.
So what are some of the key questions that, say, our future policymakers should be asking themselves as they really dig into this issue?
I think they need to think long term. How could these restrictions change global migration patterns, international cooperation, even the fight against terrorism? Are there other ways to address security concerns without resorting to these, sweeping measures? Those are the kinds of questions they should be grappling with.
All great points. It's not enough to just know what's happening right now. You've got to think about the future, about all the potential scenarios and how they could play out.
Exactly. It's about developing that strategic mindset, anticipating the challenges, and, coming up with solutions that are actually informed.
This whole discussion has really underscored just how interconnected everything is globally, hasn't it? A policy change in one country can literally send shockwaves across the world, impact everything from, economies and diplomacy to the lives of individuals.
So completely. And that's what makes studying international relations so fascinating. It's like this constantly evolving puzzle, and every day there's a new piece to figure out.
And that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
To help our listeners make sense of that puzzle, give them the knowledge and tools they need to navigate it.
Exactly. It's not just about reading headlines. It's about digging deeper, thinking critically, and ultimately becoming, informed, engaged citizens of the world.
So to all our UPSC aspirants out there, remember, this deep dive is just the starting point. Use it as a jumping off point for more research, explore different perspectives, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp. And stay updated. This whole thing is still unfolding, so what we know now could change. The final form of these restrictions, if they even happen, could look very different. So keep an eye on the news, keep those minds engaged. Great advice. All right, before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone to, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment if you've got any questions or want to delve a bit deeper into anything we talked about today.
We love hearing from you, having those conversations. Your perspectives, your questions, they really enrich this whole journey of exploration.
Now, as we leave you with something to really ponder, consider this. How could these potential U.S. travel restrictions shape the future of globalization? Will they strengthen or weaken international cooperation? It's a complex issue, no easy answers, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? How something that seems like it's just about the U.S. can actually have these huge global ripples. It shows you that we're all connected, even in ways we might not think about.
Oh, totally. And, for those UPSC aspirants out there, this really highlights how important it is to not just, memorize events, but to really understand those underlying trends, those connections, the things that are shaping the world. So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into all this, What are some key takeaways that our listeners, especially those prepping for the UPSC, should keep in mind?
Well, I think first off, it's crucial to remember that this is all still in flux.
Hmm.
The information we have right now could be outdated tomorrow. Staying up to date, relying on solid sources like the Hindu, that's absolutely essential.
Right. It's not just about knowing facts. It's about being able to, analyze things as they change, adapt your understanding as you go.
Exactly. The second thing I'd stress is, thinking about things from multiple angles. When you're approaching a topic like this, consider the politics, the economics, the social impact, even the ethical side of things.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the big picture, understanding how all these different factors kind of feed into each other.
Right. And last but not least, don't be afraid to, question things, challenge your assumptions, look at things from different perspectives, and form your own opinions based on all that.
That's what makes a good policymaker, someone who can handle all that complexity, make good decisions based on, a real understanding of what's going on.
Absolutely. And remember, that UPSC exam, it's not just about how much you know, it's about how well you think, how you analyze information, how you put together a solid argument.
So for all you aspiring diplomats and policymakers, keep those minds sharp, keep those perspectives broad, and never lose that thirst for knowledge.
And hey, keep the conversation going with us. Leave your comments, your questions down below. Let's chat.
We always love to hear from you all, learn from your insights. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds engaged.